Oh. Ah! Oh, hi weirdos. Is it just me, or does this winter really have everyone on edge? Like, maybe something called a polar vortex engulfed your entire state, creating conditions so hostile to life that even the local flora would rather abandon their earthly flesh than spend one more second in this icy hellscape. Or maybe your entire household was struck by a hibernal plague so severe that even in your fevered dreams you saw yourself suspended in a river of and all the basic physical comforts you once took for granted began to seem like the fevered ravings of a madman. Anyways, during times like that, I find it's always helpful to turn to my old friend, literature. So whether you're suffering from the post-apocalyptic cousin of seasonal affective disorder, or you're just feeling a bit down in the dumps, here are 3 weirdly funny recommendations to help warm your wintry heart. First up, Exile in Guyville by Dave White. We'll file this under Too Witty for Your City. Now, going into this book, I was already a huge fan of White's Linoleum Knife film review podcast, the sassy banter he shares with his husband and co-host Alonso Duralde, which is not to say that you need to be familiar with White's media empire in order to enjoy this book. All you need is a general enthusiasm for sassy curmudgeons and a healthy disdain for the insane culture of entitlement that surrounds the American media industry. Here's the general premise. Longtime boyfriends make a move from Dallas to LA. One is a California native with connections to the film criticism industry. The other is highly skeptical that the big city has anything to offer him other than forced interactions with delusional douchebags and a general dissolution of his personal identity. Each chapter has a suitably savage title and reads like a report on that week's most fucked up encounters, including many near misses with vehicular homicide, strangers assaulting customer service representatives, and at least one sexy shirtless drug dealer. Here's a representative section where Dave is coaxed out of his apartment to attend a theatrical performance with some new friends and one of their more questionable love interests. This is from the chapter entitled Psychotic. I hate live theater. I hated it when I lived in Dallas, and bitches we knew would say shit like, "Hey, I'm doing a one-man show about my coming out experience," or playing a corpse in Bent, or appearing in the gay man's chorus version of The Wizard of Oz. I'll just leave 2 tickets at will call for you in Morocco. See you Saturday night. And I know I'll hate it in LA. Wait, I take that back. I'm not going to hate it in LA because I'm not going. I'd rather have paper cuts on both eyeballs than sit through anything less than Olivier doing Hamlet, and that cat is dead, so fuck it. This is me refusing to go with Morocco to a play that's opening at a little theater in West Hollywood. The people putting on this show describe it as a campy musical version of 1970s disaster movie. When will gays stop building intentional camp? When will blood rain down from the skies and drown everyone responsible for making me miserable the second I walk into a community theater experience? We're going, says Morocco Mole. Dave too invited us and some other friends of his who do digital effects for one of the studios. One's a low-level producer muckety muck. I don't know, they all seem nice enough. This is our eternal damnation for being gay, already playing itself out in our not yet dead lives. I say, hell is right now. So I put on a nice shirt and go to the theater. And it turns out that Dave too barely knows any of the guys who are with us. That sort of pisses me off. A lot. Then I find out that, in fact, one of the guys in the group is someone Dave too is trying to fuck. And Dave accepted the offer of 3 extra tickets just so he could sit next to his planned conquest. Then I'm a little less pissed off because I'm totally pro-slut. This should give you a general sense of the terse, scathingly funny writing style of this book. In a way, I've found the structure and the episodic nature of the story to be reminiscent of some of those early blogging platforms that were around in the turn of the millennium. LiveJournal, Blogger. My only complaint about Exile in Guyville, and it's a good one to have, is that it left me wanting more. More background on how Dave's upbringing in Texas informed his interactions with people in LA. How he first recognized and began to embrace his queer and art critic identities. How his relationship with his now husband began and continued to evolve. The book starts with their move to California and ends after a suitably amusing adjustment period. The content maintains a pretty tight focus on day-to-day life and their new surroundings. So, Dave White, consider this a challenge. your public is demanding a sequel or a prequel or just some more stuff like this. All of us small town queers, aspiring writers, and trailing spouses could use a few more good laughs. Next up, we have this little slice of literary beefcake, The Lonesome Bodybuilder by Yukiko Motoya. We'll file this one under Yes and Hilarity. Motoya has been publishing fiction in her native Japan since the early 2000s, but this is her first collection to be published in English. It's almost a greatest hits compilation, fusing together a volume of short stories that won the Kenzaburo Oe Prize and a novella that won Japan's prestigious Akutagawa Prize. And if you love a quirky premise, you have found your new favorite author. So many of Motoya's stories in this collection really have an almost like improv comedy feel. Motoya actually does have a theater background. She founded her own production company, I believe in Tokyo. And like in an improv performance, the central premise, the quirky situation is very explicit and upfront from the very beginning in all of these stories. The thing that makes it so entertaining and utterly unlike any performance I've ever sat through is that this premise continues to be taken to weirder, further extremes throughout the story in a way that feels quite organic. Like these absurd situations, they're not just artsy ornamentation for the real plot or a metaphor for our times. You're staring at these completely surreal situations straight on the entire time, and you're watching people live their day-to-day lives inside of them. If any of these scenarios sounds remotely entertaining to you, you are going to love the hell out of this book. A boutique employee whose picky client might not be human. Killer aquadogs with names like Pastrami and The Day That the Appliances Arrived. A passive-aggressive husband made of tiny instruments and straw. Here's a selection from a short story called Q&A. The general setup is that there is a woman who has established a successful career for herself as sort of a Dear Abby-like advice giver, an agony aunt in the classic parlance. And she is bound by her contract and maybe some sense of professional integrity to continue to answer her readers' questions even on her very deathbed. And you get the general sense that she's kind of ceased to care about answering questions in a conventional or even-handed manner. I'm going to read this from my phone because I'm a cool guy who gets stuff from the library on his phone. Question. I can't leave my boyfriend even though he's physically abusive. Nurse, 28. Answer. Challenge him to a duel. Call him out to the river at midnight and have at each other once and for all. In the face of your resolute blows, set free from the bounds of reason, he is unlikely to be able to resist picking up a rock. It may hurt, but that's where you'll need to be brave. You will find you already have what it takes inside you. Drift along the border between life and death for a while. Try to act very dead. He will probably be frightened into leaving the scene without checking whether you are or not. When he finally goes, take all the time you need to shiver with joy. Question. I can't seem to meet the right person. Office worker, 34. Answer. It's about time you face up to the fact that this is a thoughtless delusion. There's no way there isn't a right person out there for you. After all, aren't we all born right people? What I mean is, we all limit our options too much. Have you considered someone from a different country? Someone old enough to be your father? Make a big change and try being with a woman. If you still can't find the right person, then try expanding your age range all the way down to newborn. Once you can include 10 and 11-year-olds, the possibilities will only widen. Look into partners you may not have previously considered. Animals are good, as are inanimate objects. If you genuinely desire not to be alone, I recommend that you take a bicycle saddle as your next partner. You think that's out of the question? But a saddle is shaped surprisingly like a human face, and once you pull it off the bicycle, you can take each other out anywhere. When you go on vacation, the money you save on the second fare means you can make many more happy memories than if you were with another human. Best of all, a saddle can't speak. You lament that you can't find the right person because you have too many expectations of men who speak and end up seeing too many of their failings. But if your partner is a bicycle saddle, there's just one thing you need from them: to gently and lovingly support your ass. This is one that I read and discussed with my friends, and we all really sincerely enjoyed it. There's a lot of consistent themes of transformation throughout these stories, the give and take in our relationships, how we're always sort of mutually influencing one another. Also this general sense that there is a deliberate and concerted amount of effort needed to convince ourselves at any point in time that our lives are stable and normal. I can honestly say that I hope a lot more of Motoya's fiction is translated very soon. And I look forward to seeing not only what she does next, but what she's already done and that just hasn't made it into English translation yet. And finally, because who doesn't find the passing of yet another year something worth celebrating, except for most people over 21, we have Birthday by César Aira. We'll file this one under a Galactic Confederacy of Dunces. Now, this one is a little bit of a cheat because the main funny bit really hinges on an incredibly specific way in which both the author, César Aira, and I, Dan Rossblock, realize that we are both, by and large, ignorant dum-dums. As with most major life epiphanies, this one begins with a casual conversation about the moon. So the titular birthday here is real-life César Aira's 50th. He's sort of not taking stock of his life, but convincing himself maybe that his 50th will be an occasion to achieve new things moving forward. A few months later, one beautiful autumn morning, I was walking along the street with Liliana. I looked up, breathing the cold, bracing air. The sky was clear, a luminous blue. Up there to my left, the moon, half full, with that porous white color it has in the daylight. To the right, hidden from us by the buildings, the sun, still low. I was feeling euphoric, not unusually, it's my natural state, buoyant and optimistic. I was chatting away about something, and then with the vague intention of cracking some kind of joke, I said, "It can't be true that the phases of the moon are produced by the Earth's shadow when it comes between the moon and the sun, because the sun and the moon are both in the sky now. The Earth isn't between them at all. But the moon isn't full. They've been fooling us. Hee hee hee. The phases of the moon must be caused by something else, and they're telling us it's the shadow of the Earth. Hee hee. It's garbage." My wife, who doesn't always appreciate my sense of humor, looked up too, in puzzlement, and asked me, "But who said the phases of the moon were caused by the Earth's shadow? Where did you get that from?" "That's what I was taught in Pringles," I said, lying. "It can't be. No one could have come up with that sort of nonsense." "But how does it work then?" "There's no shadow. The sun illuminates the moon, but only half of it, the way it is with any light source illuminating a spherical body. Depending on the relative position of the Earth, we see a portion of the illuminated half. It grows until we're seeing it all, and that's when there's a full moon, then shrinks down to nothing. Simple." "Are you serious? So I was the only one getting it wrong all this time? Hee hee." We left it there in a comic haze, one of the many I generate in the course of a day. All you have to do is say it's a bad joke, and no one bothers to look for its meaning. Except that I didn't forget this joke, and little by little the monstrosity of my ignorance dawned on me. I had indeed been getting it wrong, and it wasn't as if in this case it was something obscure that anyone might be excused for misunderstanding. On the contrary, it was almost the model of the obvious and the visible. The fact that I considered myself an intellectual, an educated, curious, intelligent man made the joke all the funnier. The moon is always suspended there in full view, lit up and conspicuous, each and every night, punctually running through the cycles of its phases 12 times a year. And the sun like a spotlight, and the Earth with its days and nights, the whole rotating system, any 8-year-old with a modicum of intelligence could have reached the correct conclusions. Or a savage, a primitive, the first man making a first attempt at thought. Preposterous as it may seem, there is a simple explanation for my ignorance on this point of basic cosmology: distraction. A historical moment of distraction. At some point in my childhood, I must have come up with that explanation of the moon's phases, perhaps in passing without really thinking, using the narrow crescent of my brain that happened to be illuminated by my attention, and in all the years since then, almost 50 of them, I had never given it another moment's thought. It wasn't a case of, I never thought about it. I thought about it once, which is worse. So as a relatively new parent of 2 children, I am never hard up for examples of my extreme ignorance or fundamental lack of understanding about how important facets of the world operate. But something about the extreme specificity of this misunderstanding, the fact that it was a major milestone for an Argentinian author that spun off into an entire philosophical text, and that I, until the age of 32, had the exact same misconception Something about that just tickled me. The rest of the book springs off of that initial gap in understanding and tries to probe a little bit deeper into what else is living and happening inside these gaps. Gaps in our knowledge, our perception and awareness, gaps in language and understanding. There's an interesting thread in this, I guess you might call it an autobiographical novella, in which Aira is looking back on a career spent writing kind of an insane volume of books. To date now, he's published about 80, I believe. And how he views the sum total of his hopes for his life as if he were waiting to write the truly transformative piece of literature that all of his previous works are sort of dry runs and rehearsals for. And assuming that his other works are this funny and philosophical, I really can't wait to dive into his back catalog. So that's all I have to talk about today. What are some of the funniest books you've read lately? What do you like to read to help you feel relaxed and cozy during these rough winter months? Let me know in the comments below or hit me up on social media. As always, I hope you like, share, and subscribe. Anything you can do to help these videos reach a wider audience is extremely appreciated. And until next time, happy reading, weirdos.